Hello, hello. It is another Tuesday, which means it's book club day over in the Grand Life Network. And I am so excited to have our Grand Life ladies here today talking again about the power of two, which is how to make the most of your partnerships at work and in life. Now, again, I did just give a little recap on how the power of two is such a powerful book to talk about the elements of managing a partnership. We've had plenty of them in our lives, and we do these things naturally. But when we dive into these books from people who have literally studied partnerships and studied the things that make them successful and a failure, this is how we're able to start dissecting and applying the things in order to help us also be more successful in our lives as well. So I'm very excited to talk this week about chapter 7, which is all about communication. Now, this is a book review from Wagner and Gale Muller. I am going to be doing quite a lot of reading from the book so that we can dive into it after as, again, a book review for our channel. So, again, everything that I'm reading is straight out of this book from Wagner and Gale Muller. So I'm going to get started with chapter 7, and this chapter is called Communicating. Now, they started off with a quote that says, "The most elaborate our means of communication, the less we communicate." And that's by Joseph Priestley. Now, I want to get started by actually reading a little story, because one of the things this book did really great is they gave so many different stories and so many different examples, because that's how you can see a lot of the different things when you see that proof. And it's like, okay, I see how this relationship went bad, because you're reading it and you can see, it's like watching a movie and you can tell the ending and how that's about to end. So I love how they always cited different relationships. And I think the story that they gave was a very insightful one as well when it comes to communicating, because it's a lot deeper than us just having a conversation, but how we communicate. So it starts by saying, Captain Kim Casey and First Officer Jonathan Palmer got along quite well. "I have a good time flying with you," Palmer told Sassy at the controls of American Connection Flight 5966. "Yeah, me too," said Sassy. The evening flight on October 19, 2004 was a short one from St. Louis to Adair County, Missouri. 13 passengers were on board, most of them medical professionals, on their way to a conference. The atmosphere in the cockpit was more than relaxed. "Gotta have fun," said Stacy. "That's the truth, man. Gotta have fun," agreed his co-pilot. "Too many of these expletive, and those are in quotes. Every time I say expletive, this is how they've kind of blanked out a word. Take themselves way too serious in this job," said the pilot. "I hate it. I've flown with them and it sucks. A month of expletive agony, and all you want to do is strangle the expletive when you get on the ground." He broadcast a burp on the radio. About 23 minutes before they were scheduled to land, the pilots heard an automated weather report from their destination. The visibility was poor because of the mist and heavy overcast. "We're not getting in," said Stacy. "Go all this expletive way," said Palmer. "Well, let's try it." "Yeah, we'll try it," said Stacy. "I don't want to go all the way out there for nothing tonight." The rest of the flight was a mixture of good teamwork between the two pilots, and the same kind of joking occurred earlier. But while casual conversation are allowed at cruising altitude, they are specifically forbidden as the pilot is descending to land. Communication is supposed to be strictly business with specific roles, phrases, and contingencies. "We're going into this crap," said Stacy as they descended to the top of the clouds in the darkness. "Look, ooh, it's so eerie and creepy. I get a suffocating feeling when I see that," said Palmer with a barking sound. "I'm drowning," joked the pilot. While much of what the two men communicated followed proper procedures, the angle of the flaps, confirming the landing gear was down, conducting the pre-landing checklist, they missed several crucial callouts. In doing so, they confused their roles and made serious errors. Palmer failed to announce one of the altitude's thresholds and announced another incorrectly. The captain was supposed to be leveling off and monitoring the instruments while the first officer looked for the lights at the airport. Stacy was not supposed to switch from the instruments to visually guiding the plane unless Palmer announced runway in sight. He never did. The plane was descending too fast, below the minimum altitude, that Palmer should have called out to the captain. Palmer failed to challenge Stacy's continued descent. I can see the ground there, said the pilot. I can't see expletive, said the co-pilot. The last communications between Stacy and Palmer were their panicked realizations that they were about to hit the ground. Trees, said Palmer. No, stop, blurted out Stacy. Oh my God, said the pilot. Holy expletive. The airplane crashed into a bean field, broke apart, and burst into flames less than 2 miles from the airport. Both pilots and 11 of the 13 passengers were killed. Now, in its report on the accident, the National Transportation Safety Board faulted the pilots for, among other things, not keeping their communication focused on the flight and failing to make several crucial call-outs between them. And that's the end of that story. But think about how impactful that was. By not keeping your communication focused on what you're supposed to be focused on, just like when we were reading, it said, if you're cruising and you're in cruising altitude, sure, you can have a relaxed conversation. But if you're descending, there's certain things you're supposed to be focused on, especially if you're saying, oh, you can't see and different things like that. Why was there no shift in focus, right? Because, and I'll continue, where it says, most of the blame was placed on Stacy for not setting the proper tone inside the cockpit. Had he emphasized the pilot's goals and strategies as they prepared for the approach and landing, it is likely that Flight 5966 pilots would have suspended their humorous banter and engaged in only operationally relevant conversation below 10,000 feet, stated the report. Now, again, that's having that system in place, knowing when you're at certain points, this is how the conversation needs to be, because this is a time for focus and there's a time for play. That's something that we, again, have lived through, like, oh, there's a time for play and a time for work. But this is how you can see how it can start to affect your communication. And when it affects your communication, how it can then have severe ripple effects that can be life or death. So I want to keep reading further down to just talk more about that different communications. So it says, rarely appreciated, however, is communicating itself is collaborative, an issue of trust within the larger partnership that surrounds it. Communication is more than a purely functional aspect of working together. Every time two counterparts talk, their relationship changes. What goes on beneath the surface is more important than the information exchange. The 3 statements about communicating that emerged from Gallup's research demonstrates the importance of more than just both people keeping the other informed about what they're doing. Then they rarely misunderstand each other. We are good listeners for each other, and we show appreciation for what the other does. Now, again, think about if those were your 3 main focuses when going into communication. Again, trying to not misunderstand each other. And what does that take? It takes being considerate of the other person, listening to the other person, and not just seeing it from your view. Because a lot of times we see things and hear things from our perspective, which they even dove into here as well. But that's a big part of not misunderstanding each other and having that as a goal when going into communicating is, you know what, when I'm talking to this person, I need to make sure I'm not just seeing it from my view, not just seeing it from their view, but also seeing it as the view of what it is. Because, when they tell you, oh, to a story, there's your truth, their truth, and the truth, right? So it's like going into that communication, you want to be considerate of that as well. And that takes being a good listener and showing appreciation for what the other does. We all know we like that feeling, so we have to think how the other person would like that feeling as well when we're communicating, because now you're helping show that you're appreciating that conversation and showing that you're getting something from that conversation. And then in turn, we'll start to receive that back as well. So by us going into these and setting these as the goals and strategies going into communicating, that's how we're going to start to get better results. So let's see. It also says communicating is such a major issue that experiments testing cooperation routinely prohibit the two subjects from talking, sending signals, or even seeing each other, because the best strategy differs so much depending on whether the other person will prove to be friend or foe. Our brains latch onto the slightest cues, smiles, winks, nods, handshakes, the assess to a counterpart's trustworthiness. These little signals provide a fast and frugal way to get a collaboration going. According to one theory, the most cooperative people have superior emotional radar for finding others they can trust, but only if they have the chance to communicate. So it's not just the content, it's the contract that only real conversation creates. And I thought that was such a powerful statement to say how that when you have that communication, that contract that it creates, because again, you build some form of trust, some type of, okay, this person said this, so regardless of if I think this on a third, I'm going to take their word over because based on this conversation, and now we're going to move accordingly from there. So from there, they talked about two different things that can happen with communication. So from a practical perspective, staying in contact with your partner allows the two of you to be aware of the other's next move, to make your intentions clear, to brainstorm or perhaps stumble on an idea that you would not have separately, and to share your candid assessments with each other. And in this section here, it goes on to say how having those kind of open communications where you can share with the partner, it starts to make you feel now confident as well. You guys also know that saying two heads are better than one, and that's so true for even Tiny here in this group. She and I is someone who have that all the time where it's like, I'm thinking one thing and she will be thinking the same, and we can just build on it so easily, and it's like somebody that I can go to and not sound crazy, pitch an idea to, and it's like, no, this is how you can actually get it done, so understanding and how you can use your relationships for that is such a strength. It allows you the ability to think out loud with someone that will not scuff and who will try to improve on the idea and who will try to keep your confidence as a major advantage to two people that can have over working over one. And that's the thing that I just said. So going into the opposite, it says silence creates the opposite effect, where you won't look stupid if you keep quiet, and you can't be burned with information you never reveal. Suspicious counterparts administer to themselves a sort of mental Miranda warning, worried that anything they say can and will be used against them. But whether or not you intend to do so, failing to communicate creates a threat in your partner's mind that you are not committed to the collaboration, that you do not trust her, and that you just might make a run for your goal by yourself and claim all the credit. It's much easier to vilify someone who has not explained his motivations, much easier to read into the silence of the threat of an unpleasant surprise. And I think that was just, when I read that paragraph, think about how many times we've gone into different partnerships, and I was thinking that one more along, businesses, especially in this like NFT space of different partnerships. And it's like, you don't know who people are and what people's intentions are. And when you're asking questions and they're not answering, it leaves you to then wonder and fill in the blanks. And that is something that they also went into here, where it says, recursive thinking is a double-edged sword. There is no sympathy without recursion. A great partner who understands that his colleague is struggling will shoulder more of the burden and offer his support. It is impossible to understand how a collaborator's desire for the goal differs from your own unless you mentally put yourself in their shoes. Yet too much recursion and too little discussion inevitably lead to the wrong assumptions. Rather than explain, their rational collaborators routinely assume the other person knows the reason. Rather than compliment the other person on a good job, partners assume their praise would be redundant. Rather than ask for information and listen closely, people assume they already know what the other person would say. And that just wrapped up everything we just read throughout this book on how these different parts of communication can work for you and how they will work against you if you're not using these properly. So again, just being mindful of these simple 3 things, again, because it's about setting goals before the communication even starts. That's how this whole story even started, with there was a strict parameters and goals that should have been made and strategies when it came to communicating about how communication should have been had in different situations so that there were good outcomes and you can land safely. Otherwise, you're going to go run into a tree and crash and burn, and everybody around you is burning too. So understanding how to try to understand each other while talking, that takes listening to each other and showing that appreciation. So the last thing it says is, assuming without verifying is dangerous. We are not mind readers. We are mind guessers. Sometimes we guess wrong. This is the reason why partnerships that involve a risk of death, such as piloting an airplane, rock climbing, and scuba diving, the most important messages are mandated and standardized to remove any ambiguity. So that's all I have to read here from the book. And again, that just summarized it all again. How you have to strategize. What did that last sentence say? The most important messages are mandated and standardized to remove any ambiguity. And that was important to say, because I know last week that was one of the things that we continued to talk about, was just that communication. And I think one of the points that CJ had really made that makes a successful partnership is people that continuously communicate. Like she gave the example with work and checking up with her employees weekly and making sure everybody understands their role and their task. That's something I've personally taken note of, and in Raw we've all came together like, look, this is something that we just not only read in this book but also understand from real life, that these are the kind of things that make a difference in making something successful. If we're all going towards a goal, we all have a separate role. We all need to be able to communicate and share our ideas and be able to understand who's doing what and follow up to make sure that there's no problems. Follow up with each other every week, once a month. Even the Grand Life Network, that's something we do. We follow up once a month at the beginning of the month and say, hey, how are you doing on your goals? What kind of goals do you have this month? What kind of goals do you have for this year? And not just saying, oh yeah, those sound, good, and letting our fellow sisters fall, into old ways, but reading again books like last month, how we read the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and it's like, we want to make sure our goals are true goals that's going to line us up for success, and applying all these different lessons to help each other be successful. So one question I would like to pose to all the ladies here, after reading that or listening to that, is there anything that you can say you would like to implement to help change how you communicate with others? And that can be in work and your own businesses, your personal life, anything at all. and I'll see if anybody unmutes, if they want to speak first, if they have anything that they wanted to share about what we just read, or again, any changes that they are going to be making and how they communicate and operate their own partnerships.
Yes, I think sorry. I think just being very clear about like what's going on like within the relationship or within the project or whatever is just very important. And when people do have questions, like it's kind of like your duty to answer each other. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't, like how you were saying we're mind guessers. Like, don't leave people guessing, because people gonna guess some crazy shit, and
Right.
it's just gonna go crazy from there, right? So that's
Yeah.
why I just had to chime in on that real quick.
Girl, you already know. I was over here like, woo, they is preaching to the choir today, because there's a lot of information, going around, and it's hard for people to build with you if there's questions and there's not that clear understanding on, hey, we can ask questions and we can get answers, because like you said, Tiny, then it just leads to this unknowing, so how, with that being said, what would you say is something that you would change with then how you communicate with others when you're the one that's having these conversations and leading the conversations?
I think maybe just like I don't know. I feel like I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like most of the time, like I kind of say like I kind of like if I'm working with somebody, I try to you know what I'm saying, make sure that they understand and I understand, and like,
Right.
but I guess my issue is relationships and not really like a business partnership,
Right.
but
Well, we can go back to those, three topics still then, where it comes to, okay, so we understand that that misunderstanding is what's the conflict. So do you feel like that you guys are being good listeners to each other, where you're able to hear your perspective, hear the other perspective in order to get that common understanding? Because if that's where it starts, right? That's where you have to be able to say something, they have to listen, respond, the other can say something, listen, respond, and that's how you start getting through these harder conversations to get to some kind of understanding.
yeah, absolutely not. That's not what is happening over here on this end. So, I guess I don't. Let me try to think of how to word it. I don't know, because I'm like a very I don't want to say unemotional, because I'm not like a fucking robot, but like I'm just not like I don't know. I'm just not like a very emotional person. Whereas like the person that I'm in a relationship is like very emotional. So like it's just like really hard for me to like, I don't know. He's in the other room too, so sorry. I'm like stuttering.
No, it's cool. And again, just take into consideration those keys then, try to listen. Next time you guys have a conversation, try to listen and understand where they're coming from, and try to get, go into that conversation with the goal of, I want to understand where you're coming from. I want to listen to understand where you're coming from so we can get to the next part of the conversation. And like you said, you might not be all emotional, but that last thing was just showing appreciation for what they do. You might have parts where you're like having your own issues, but where you take the time to show that appreciation for what is being done, that can be the key to again start unlocking everybody being able to understand each other and find that level ground of understanding.
Yeah, definitely. But I feel like, because in like regular partnerships, I feel like I'm like so understanding. Like, you can talk to me, we can bounce ideas off of each other. But like when it comes to like, I don't know, like that relationship is just like, I just don't, I don't know. I guess me personally, I had like a hard time letting things go.
Yeah.
So that's like my biggest issue with like not listening, because I feel like I wasn't listened to for so long. So I think
Right.
that's really just like stuck with me. So I
Right.
think that's just maybe that's something I need to work on, is
It
like I
it
could improve
is.
this partnership by just,
And you know
listen,
what?
like trying to like get over that.
Seriously, and you should definitely read this whole book here, the Power of Two, because right before communication, looking at the table of context, there's actually 8 steps to a powerful partnership. So the first one was the complementary strengths, what we talked about before, and a common mission. Then there's fairness. Then there's trust. acceptance and forgiveness. So they dive into how to look at those different things when it comes to regaining that trust, accepting those flaws and things that may have happened, and forgiving where our partner may not be where we think they should be when it comes to that communication, you know? So that was cool. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Definitely, Miss Mimi.
So, I'm going to kind of explain it in two ways for myself, and definitely on the lines of listening. But okay, and it's circumstantial because overall I feel like I'm a good listener. However, when it comes to certain like phases, whether it's on a personal relationship or in business. So my examples are in business, we're in the thick of it. We're in the thick of a project or just a busy season, and you're just like grinding it out and you're just getting things done. What I find myself doing, and I have to like catch myself and calm down, is I'm anticipating what someone's going to say or what their response is going to be, then actually giving them an opportunity to express to me like what's going on, because I'm just so like on the grind and like,
Right.
all right, like, we got to get this done. Boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean? Instead of, so I feel like I'm so energetic or like hyped about what's going on that I lose touch of just like listening to the person. And so I had a situation last week, and someone was trying to explain something to me, and I kept anticipating what they were saying, and I kept like cutting them off, like, no, 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 this is all I need to know, blah, blah, blah. And finally they were like, I am trying to tell you, like,
Right.
I'm explaining this to you. And then they got my attention. I was like, my bad. You know what I mean? And then I wasted like 20 minutes anticipating what they were going to say instead of like actually listening and giving them an opportunity and opening my ears to like hear. And then the flip side of that, like on a personal level, it's like if I don't feel like I'm not being heard, and I'll just keep like trying to make my point over and over and over again until I feel like you hear me. And really, I've just worn the person out so freaking much, from just saying the same thing over and over and not, again, listening to what they have to say, just because I'm in my feelings and I feel like, well, I'm not being heard. You know what I mean? So
wow,
those are my examples.
That's some powerful points right there, and I like how you had already even stated those corrections. Being able to self-reflect and be like, man, I can see where this is the issue and how I can make that change. And like you said, wasting 20 minutes, in a conversation where it's like, if you just let them talk without trying to do that guesswork, especially when the book said what assuming without verifying is dangerous, because we could be wrong, and that person, like you said, had to say enough is enough. Let me just talk, and like in businesses, that's not the kind of atmospheres you even want to create, where people are scared to come to you because you're not going to listen. Or like you said, on the flip side, and your relationships where you just wear somebody out because you're just going and going and going to the point that they don't even want to communicate, and you're not able to again get to that level of understanding, because that's the whole point that we try to get to when it comes to communicating, is some level of understanding, right? So it's like you said, both sides of the stick, that just creates our own blocks with trying to get that other person to understand and continue to be open to communicate. So thank you for sharing. Those are some awesome points. Really, really enjoyed that. Miss CJ or Black Queen, did you have any thoughts that you'd like to share on some changes that you like to make when it comes to communicating? Miss CJ.
Oh, Black Queen, did you want to? I know you unmuted too.
Oh, I mean, if you want to go first, that's fine.
Okay. I'll go. I'll go. Thank you. One of the things I thought about communication is that what I'd like to change is don't fear communication, is because there's a lot of times I feel like in partnerships and projects and group things, I don't really communicate because I don't know enough, or I feel insecure in what I don't know or do know. Well, I don't know. And so I'm not really clear. And I was like, well, if I don't hear anybody else asking, if I don't hear anything else happening, then I'm just going to assume and I'll figure it out later, when I really should communicate, because that makes for bad partnerships as well. So the lack of communication is something I'd like to, that's a problem for me. And so I find myself in a predicament trying to catch up later when I probably could have been more clear early on, or got, even if it meant an inconvenience a little bit, and worry, the fear of being misunderstood. Because I don't like, I was speaking is very difficult for me a little bit, but I'm working on that. So that's my part in communication, is lacking communication is just as bad.
Right.
So.
And that's powerful, because I'm even just looking here at this quote here where it says, a partner who understands that his colleague is struggling will shoulder more of that burden and offer his support, So like you said, without asking those questions, if you're with, that partner, it's because you know that they can help you. So like you said, we have to ask for that help when we need it, so that we can be that good partner for ourselves as well. And I can see how much you've grown just in the time that we've started really working together with Raw and stuff, and coming out your shell and asking more, and like you said, speaking up. So I think that's a really powerful point too, because a lot of us have that I don't want to ask, I'll just figure it out on my own, and we start putting a lot more work on our plate by trying to go that route, and making things take longer than needed, or sometimes end up on a completely different path by trying to do it that way as well. So that's a really good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Miss Black Queen.
Okay, I had to get back to my screen.
Yeah.
But yes, as far as me communicating and how I communicate with, I need to learn to communicate more. Like when I go through things, I tend to like shut people out, or just focus on 2-3 things. Would it be like my kids, my house, and then I just stop communicating with people. Period. Like I just stop doing everything.
Right.
Sometimes I think when it comes to being in a relationship, like if I have my man or anything, my communication is fine there, but it's just like the outside world.
Right.
I don't know how to, cope sometimes with other people, I was with my kid's dad for about almost 9 years, and I was doing more communicating than he was, So, I got to the point where I just got tired of that,
Right.
Like when I say I got a future for me and the kids, I need you to tell me what's going on with you, like, and if I feel like I'm doing all the talking in the relationship, then I mean it's pointless,
Right. I think that is a really good point from the very beginning when we started this whole chapter, which is just setting that intention, for understanding, okay, I'm going to keep this line of communication open because this is what I'm trying to achieve out of it, you know? And just understanding and strategizing how to communicate, because then that makes it a little easier understanding, like you said, when those times when we want to just shut out and be like, I'm just going to focus on X, Y, and Z. Because again, I'm sure that we all have those times. There was many, many times where before y'all see me on social media, I had no social media for years, and I was okay with that. And I'd be okay with not having it. That's why I could just delete it and just kind of, go do my own thing, because, we have those times where it's like, man, I got other stuff to focus on, and communicating with others is not my main goal. So understanding just again how to strategize and use communication as a tool to keep certain doors open, it becomes again a powerful tool. And I think that was the whole key of this book, was helping us to start using communication as that tool to help us advance in all of these relationships. We all gave kind of like a business and a personal example, and we can all take something from each of ours. That's why I think our Grand Life Network and these book clubs are so powerful because every single meeting we come with something just like this where everybody has their own perspective and we can all take something from that. So even if it wasn't your thing that you'd like to change, hearing somebody else say, man, this is something that I would like to change and that I like to, do different, then we can start to look at ourselves like, yeah, that's something I want to try to do different as well, by speaking up, because that's something that I would like to change, in my communication, just like CJ said, is just speaking up. Sometimes I don't speak because I'm going to stumble over words and I have a speech impediment and I'm going to say the wrong thing and end up sounding silly, but then in the end, I know what I meant. And a lot of times, y'all know we be ahead. So it's just like, when things come into fruition and it's like, dang, I didn't speak up. Now everybody is still in that same airplane crash. So that's something that I'm definitely building on as well. It's just that confidence to speak up when I know, I should speak up, even when it's like, man, I don't know what kind of issues this is going to create. I don't know who this is going to scare away. I don't know how others is going to take this. It's just understanding and strategizing how you're going to communicate that so that others can understand you and take it however they want, so that's something that I'd like to change as well. And just I feel like I'm always an understanding person, but I think they also hit it on the nail on the head, where sometimes I can almost be too over understanding and too considerate and guessing, like we all said, even Mimi, guessing what others are going to say and assuming this is how they're going to respond rather than giving them a chance to, because sometimes what people are going to say and take it as is completely different than what you thought. So that's definitely one of the things I would definitely like to change. And I think that's been a really great wrap up here for our communication and the power of two. Now, again, I did even just read through that index and what the power of two really dives into. And again, how they have a story, and they don't even have a story. They have so many stories for each of these different topics when it comes to how you can actually start to enhance those relationships and start to use that communication as a tool. Because again, we're not really created to be doing any of this kind of stuff on our own, whether it's a partner at work, we're not none of us are working in a one-man business, or some of us have kids, so even understanding how to have a partnership with them and communicate with them and, find the different things to show them even how to start having successful partnerships going forward, and just applying these tools that we're learning so that we can get better, rather than just thinking, I know communication is important. I know there's some things I got to change. No, let's really dig into these books and see how we can start changing that communication so that we can get better at it. Because the more we practice it, the better we'll get. It's not like our communication is just going to get better now that we done had the book club. No, but we done talked about it. We've all sat here and put it out into the universe like, wow, this is what I'm mindful of that I need to change. Now, here's some things that I can do to start changing it so that we don't go crashing, so that we can go strategizing. And again, that's something I'm going to keep emphasizing, because that is the main lesson for today, is go into each partnership communicating with a purpose, with a strategy. That's where the pilots went wrong, because they know, if we're descending, we need to be having focused conversations. You need to be calling out this so that I can do this. And if we're at cruising altitude, cool, then we can be relaxed. Then we can chill and talk about other things. So going into different forms of conversations, understanding whether it's going to be a conversation that's relaxed or a conversation with a purpose, and how to handle that so that you can go into it searching for understanding. Don't go into it looking to win, right? That's not what this book said, how to win a conversation. No, it said how to understand each other by listening to each other and by showing the other person appreciation. That book didn't say nothing about what you're supposed to expect the other person to do in order for you to get that communication, but it highlighted what the simple things we can do in order to try to get that, which is showing things that we do appreciate in that conversation, because we know that that kind of stuff makes a difference. You know, when you add a little sprinkle of appreciation, how that starts going a long way, and that starts getting you a lot further. You know, and that starts opening that, oh, now others might be wanting to listen more and start to show you some appreciation as well. And then you'll find yourself having an understanding and having successful communications, and then understanding, oh, this is a formula on how I can keep repeating so that there's less misunderstandings and more just efficient conversations so that we can keep getting stuff done. So that's all I have to say for today. Did anybody have any last thoughts, concerns, or things that they'd like to share about our conversation today, or the power of two and the awesome power of two? No? Alrighty. Well, this has been a great book club day. I thank you guys for coming. All of our listeners, make sure you tune in. We will be back again 2 Tuesdays from now with another book, another mind-elevating book that we're going to be diving into and taking these lessons apart and applying them to our lives. Y'all don't know, but all of us here in the Grand Life Network, we are all destined for such greatness. We have done so many great things already. And I always say we are just getting started, but it's so true. We are just getting started. And I know by us literally putting the work in every other week, every time we come together, we come together every time with a purpose when it comes to this communicating. So, we just have to continue to take these lessons and apply them outside of here